Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Tanya, a salary woman in Japan, and today I want to talk about part-time jobs, or also known as baito or arubaito in Japanese. I'm going to cover topics like where can you search for a part-time job, what kind of jobs can you get, what is the salary range, and I'll also share my experience working part-time job in Japan. This video will be especially useful for those who are on a student visa or on a dependent visa and search for ways to make a bit of extra cash. I will also cover situations for different Japanese language levels, and I will share on which job I made 10,000 yen per hour. At the end, I will also share tips how to not fall for a scam advertisement, so make sure you watch until the end. And before we start, subscribe to my channel and like this video. Let's start with a general overview of conditions for part-time job employment in Japan. If you're on a student visa or on a dependent visa, you can work up to 28 hours a week during the normal school term. During the long holidays, such as in winter or summer, you can work up to 40 hours a week, so basically a full-time employment, but it cannot exceed 8 hours a day. The way to calculate your hours is that any 7 days in a row cannot exceed 40 hours or 28 hours. Another thing is that the visa itself does not grant you the right to work part-time. It might sound confusing, but in order to work on these types of visa, you need to get an extra approval from the immigration. There are two ways to do that. One is I highly recommend it, and please do not forget to do that. When you first enter Japan with your new visa, you can request the part-time employment approval right in the airport, and it only takes about 2 minutes to get it. They just stamp it on your Zaidu card, your residence card. Sometimes the people at the airport, the immigration officer, does not ask you whether you want it or not. In this case, you might just forget to ask for it and you will not get your approval. In this case, you will have to go to the immigration bureau at your original bureau and get this approval, which will take about a few weeks, sometimes even a month or more. So I do recommend when you're entering Japan with your new visa, go ahead and go proactively ask whether you can get this stamp when you're doing your immigration entrance procedures. So where can you work in Japan as a part-timer? Basically pretty much everywhere except one industry, fuzoku. Basically in decent businesses such as pachinko, dance clubs, nightclubs, host clubs, you name it. Basically everything that is associated with nightlife, a bit of indecent lifestyle and stuff like that. The reason is usually these businesses are linked to yakuza, some gang groups, and of course the government doesn't want their foreigners to be involved with that. I actually saw some foreigners on the internet claiming they work as like hostess in Japan, but honestly they are probably not on the student visa or dependent visa, otherwise it would be illegal and they would be subject to deportation. So please do not think that you can also work these part-time jobs unless you have like a permanent residence in Japan. Another thing is that even though this might not be like a nightclub, a strip club or whatever, it might be just a bar, there is a legal restrictions on how dark the place can be for foreigners to work at, and the restriction is 10 lux. Honestly, I don't know what that means, but when I googled, it's about, so the candle, the light of the candle, 1 meter wide, this is the 10 lux. So everything that looks dark, even like a bar or a dark restaurant, apparently you cannot work at these places. So if you are planning to like be employed at some kind of like restaurant, make sure that you ask these kind of details, because you cannot rely on owners to know all the laws associated with hiring a foreigner. Other than fuzoku, you can work at pretty much any business, any industry in Japan. Popular ones are like konbini, supermarkets, restaurants. You can even work at izakayas. And I even know a person who works at a farm. He studies at a language school, and his part-time job is basically to clean cows. So all kinds of stuff is possible. You can also work a normal office job, just part-time. It depends on your language abilities more than anything, so let me cover it just now. So what kind of jobs are common among foreigners and what is the pay? The bad news is that most of the jobs like that are paid about minimum wage, which is about 1,000 yen across Japan. It can be as low as 950 and can go as high as 1,136 if I'm not wrong in Tokyo. Tokyo is of course the highest paid area in Japan. The good news is that you can increase your income depending on what your Japanese language and what your English level is. So with native or near native English abilities, you can work as an English teacher. This is a very popular and I would say a very good option for many people. Common places to teach English is Eikaiwa, which is basically like a conversation club where you can go and just talk, like communicate with Japanese speakers who want to have better communication skills in English. The thing is, these places are usually not like hardcore English teaching. They are more like a conversation club. The same goes for kindergarten. Kindergarten is a very popular destination for people who want to work part-time in English teaching, and it's a very specific kind of job because it's not just English teaching, it's also like babysitting. I actually had experience working English teaching for kindergarteners, and it was okay because I love kids, but I know some people are not fans. So I do recommend this kind of job. One thing to pay attention to is that please do not make it your permanent career. It's very easy to like just keep going on inertia, but I do not recommend that because it's really hard to get into other industries if you end up in the English teaching career. If you don't want or cannot work as English teacher, there are of course many other options. They depend on your level of Japanese. If you have a lower level of Japanese, which is from 0 to about N3, you can try jobs at like konbini, supermarkets, restaurants, and sometimes even factories. So for people who have a bit higher level of Japanese, I think konbini or restaurants will suit better because you can have a bit of like communication with customers. But if you have like 0 Japanese and you have to make more money to survive, I would recommend going to places like factories where you can pack bento. There is minimum language involved. More or less, you just need to understand what the instructions are. I know that lots of foreigners work at Kurazushi and all those kaiten sushi chains, and you'll be surprised to know that most of your sushi are not made by Japanese there, they're made by foreign students. Apparently these jobs are quite easy to enter, they're easy to learn, do not require some specific skills or high level of Japanese, so it might be a good option for people who are looking for extra cash but do not possess like some specific specialized skills. I also heard from people who work at these jobs that this kind of jobs do not provide enough opportunities to speak Japanese. So if you want to practice your Japanese, this might not be a good place because the talking is either discouraged at all. For example, at the factory, they just want you to work. They don't need you to talk. Or if you work at the convenience or supermarket, you'll probably use just very fixed, specific phrases. So if your priority in working a job is to get a bit of language exposure, maybe some other jobs will suit you better. These kind of places pay minimum wage, so about 1,000 plus minus yen per hour, but you can be paid a bit more, maybe a bit like plus 200 plus 100 yen for early and night shifts. Now, if you have a higher level of Japanese starting from N2, you can enter jobs that are more reserved for specialized skills, for example, translation work or office jobs. These are the delicious jobs because they have very good conditions. This is not manual labor, and also you can put them on your resume and it will be a bit more attractive for the future employer when you apply for jobs in Japan. Office jobs often lead to permanent employment at the company you're working at, so this might be a fast track for you finding a permanent job in Japan. The type of job can be very different. Some companies just hire interns, some hire part-time staff, like for marketing and other purposes. One of my friends is working at a perfume company where she's doing like logistics work alongside her full-time colleagues. I also had friends who worked part-time as software engineers and they actually continued at these companies full-time. So these are very good options if you are possessing some kind of specialized skills, your Japanese is on the better level. The salary at these kind of jobs will be different from company to company. Some pay the minimum wage, and this is unfortunately very common because it's like an internship and you don't have skills, they teach you a lot. Other companies can pay quite a good wage, let's say 3,000 to 2,000 yen per hour, but it is a bit more rare. You have to, in case of translation, if it's a freelance job, you actually get paid much better. When I was working my translation job, I was making about 5,000 to 10,000 yen per hour. My language pair was a bit rare. Actually, I had a few languages in my pocket: English, Japanese, Russian, and Ukrainian, which is quite rare. So I was making about 6,000-7,000 on average. In case your language pair is a bit more common, like Japanese and English, you'll be paid about 2,000-3,000 yen per hour. If it's a bit more rare, like French and German and so on, you'll be paid better. So this is a very, let's say you decided what kind of job you want to get, so how do you find it? If you're a student at a university or a language school, your school will probably have a special board or an office that helps students to find a part-time job employment. So usually there is a board with advertisements where you can just like come and see what kind of companies offer jobs. You can also go directly to that office if there is one and just ask what they have for you. The good thing about this university slash school help is that these jobs are usually vetted, so these are not scam jobs, which are quite common in Japan. Another good thing about these kind of jobs is that they are probably open to foreigners, since they decided to list their advertisement at your school or university. Some jobs in Japan, they do not welcome foreigners, and unfortunately this is quite common. If you don't have such an option of having a school to help you, you can just walk around your neighborhood and see who is hiring. Usually restaurants or konbini will have an advertisement pasted on their doors or windows with saying like, we are hiring. It used to be very common to just walk in a shop or restaurant and ask whether they are hiring or not. Lately it's not that common, especially for chain places, because they would usually have an advertisement outside or they would have an online advertisement. So unless it's like a very small shop that you're very interested in and they might just fail to have an advertisement online, you can walk in and ask. But more commonly, people will be a bit scared about like foreigners walking in and trying to get some information about jobs from them, especially if it's like konbini and the part-time staff is usually there. So if you walk in, even if you decide to do it in person, don't just ask any staff on site. You should ask for a tencho, at least a person who is managing the store, and they will help you to find out how to do the interviews. But I do recommend to do it online as everyone else. Most of the shops around you would list their advertisement either on their websites, if it's a big konbini, if it's a big supermarket, or on some job aggregators such as Baitoru or Townwork. I will leave links in the description, so check these out. When I just came to Japan, I actually wanted to try working at konbini, and I went for an interview. I found the online website and I just filled in some form, put in a date of the interview that I want to have, and I went there, I brought my CV, and I actually failed the interview. And the reason is they had an exam where they tested like math and language abilities there. It was just like a konbini stuff job, and I think either I was nervous or maybe I'm just stupid, but I didn't do it well. I didn't get the call back. So be ready if you're going for like interview or supermarket interviews, that you will be getting this kind of tasks. So maybe not just an interview, but also a small exam. Another good thing is networking. Having your friends recommend you to a job they are working at, and this is usually much easier and faster than finding a job yourself. The thing is, it might be a bit unrealistic for people who just came to Japan and have no one here, no friends or family. So it's up to you. If you have an option of networking, some friends already who are settled in Japan, you can ask them to recommend you to a job. Actually, that was networking that helped me find my high-paying translation job. I have some friends who are friends with a translation agency, and they said that they know me, that I know Japanese, I know Ukrainian, English, and Russian, and they recommended me to this translation agency, and they contacted me, so I started working for them. So otherwise, I would probably never find out that there is a demand for this kind of jobs. In case you want to get an office job, this is a bit of a more tricky quest, and it looks a bit more like a real job hunting. So you really need to go to the websites of the companies you're interested in. You have to look at the advertisements, whether they're hiring interns, whether they're hiring part-time, and you have to apply with like your CV. You have to go through usually the interviews. So it's a bit more difficult. So if you're trying to make fast money and get in the game as soon as possible, I think working on other jobs such as convenience supermarkets is a better option. Make sure you don't get hooked on scam jobs. This actually became quite a problem in Japan. You can watch my reel on Yabi Baito. These are baito that are run by gangs. Would usually contact you through WhatsApp or Line and offer some kind of easy jobs, usually online, that pay very good money. I always get messages on WhatsApp from people who claim to be recruiters from Indeed or LinkedIn, and it's just so scammy. Like, don't fall for these. Even if you're desperate, even if you need a job, this is not an option because you'll be just scammed for more money. One of the common scams is that the recruiter offers you a job, but they say that you need to go through some kind of training first. And while you go through this training, they will slowly make you pay money. They'll also make you input your personal information and steal your information as well. And now let's talk about whether you can work a part-time job when you're working already full-time on a working visa. The answer is yes, it's possible, but with a certain condition. First, you can only do jobs that are under your scope of visa. For example, if you're a software engineer and you work as a software engineer full-time and also part-time on weekends at some other company, this is allowed. But if you're a software engineer and you want to teach part-time at a college, this falls under a different type of category, under a different type of visa, and this is not allowed in principle. You have to go and ask for a special permit to do this kind of job. Another thing is that your company might prohibit you from having a part-time job. And this is very common in Japan. The reason is they don't want you to overwork on weekends for some other company. They want you to do your best at this only particular company. And they also afraid of competition. Let's say you're a software engineer who writes a code at a main company, and then you go next day to some other competitor company and write down code there, or maybe potentially leaking some secrets. Some people say that you can still work a part-time job, and if your company confronts you, you can sue them. But I do not recommend to get into conflict with your main company, because if you lose a job or something happens, you would have to find another one, and the visa and everything. This is just a pain in the ass, so I do not recommend you to go this way. So let's cover some of the frequently asked questions about part-time jobs. First is how to address for a part-time job interview. Casual style is actually fine for part-time job interviews in Japan, unlike the full-time ones. I do not recommend for you to wear short buttons or very open tops or slippers, but for a normal interview at a convenience or supermarket or restaurant, I would wear sneakers, some kind of a long skirt or pants, and just a plain shirt or t-shirt. But in case you're interviewing for an office job, I would recommend to observe at least business casual style. Another common question from foreigners: do I have to cover my tattoos and piercing? Well, this really depends on the place. Most places in Japan are still very much conservative. If you're interviewing for convenience, supermarkets, restaurants, they'll probably not be happy to see your tattoos. They will not tell you directly that you are not hired because of the tattoos. So it's better to cover those just to avoid unnecessary trouble. Another question that I get quite often is, can I work on an abroad company while staying in Japan on a student visa or dependent visa? The answer is this type of job will be treated as a part-time job as well, and you have to pay taxes on those. So 28 hours during the normal term, 40 hours during the long holidays is what applies to these jobs. In case you think that, well, Japanese will never know where you get the money from, this is not true. They can investigate the source of your money, and if they discover that you are not paying taxes on them, you might be deported from the country. Alright, so let me tell you on what kind of jobs I worked while being in Japan. So first, I came to Japan on a student visa. I was a max scholar, so I was getting a scholarship about 146,000 yen per month. This is not enough to live in Tokyo nicely, maybe just for the survival. So I was paying rent about 75,000 plus utilities, and I would only get less than 70,000 for everything, groceries, clothes, and everything else. So definitely not enough, so I decided I need a part-time job. As I have mentioned before, I failed my convenient interview, and maybe for the best, because a bit later I found an English teaching job / programming teacher job. Well, I'm not really a programmer, but I did study a bit of Python back in my country, so I decided, yeah, why not? I'm kind of interested in this kind of stuff, so I interviewed. This was not a Japanese company, a foreign company that was based in Japan. They just opened their business there, so they were looking for freelance teachers, and I happened to be just a good option for them because I knew English, I knew Japanese, and I also did some programming before, so I got the job. At first, it was a freelance-based job. They were paying per hour, 2,000 yen per hour, plus whatever I spent on transport. A month or 2 months later, they offered me a more stable position. That was a teacher / operations job, and I loved it a lot. So they were paying me about 100,000 yen per month, and I was working 13 hours per week, plus minus. It was a very international team, and I'm still friends with people from that part-time jobs. Unfortunately, the company closed their Tokyo office. Fortunately, I already had another job lining up for me. This was the translation job, the high-paid one. This job came out in unfortunate circumstances. As you know, the Ukrainian war broke out, and I was in Japan back then, and there was a huge demand for people who know Japanese, English, and Ukrainian, Russian to translate news and interviews. As I said, I found this job through networking. My friends recommended me to the translation agency, and they contacted me. So I was going to different TV stations most of the time, such as Asahi, Nikkei, NHK, and others. And this was a very good paying job, as I said, about 5,000 to 10,000 yen per hour every time. So I was getting quite a bit every month, about 200,000. One important thing to mention, it was a freelance job. So sometimes I would have more job, sometimes I would have less job. Depending on the month, I would be a bit out of money. Sometimes I would have more money than usual. So if you're taking on a freelance job, including like model jobs, please know that you might not have a stable income every time of the year. While on a student visa, I was also actively searching for a full-time job in Japan, so I was taking on some internship chances. I had one internship with a very famous Japanese company that does art spaces. And I think you guys know what the name of the company is. Please guess it in the comments. I don't want to name it here, but they're very famous and they're very popular with foreigners who come to Japan. Anyway, I got internship at that company as a project manager, and they offered me a 2 weeks internship just to see how the chemistry between us is going. And it was a bit of a mixed feelings experience. I would say it was a very good chance to get to know Japanese corporate a bit better. They also provided lunches. They paid for this internship. I got about 80,000 yen for 2 weeks, and I was working 35 hours per week. So 70 hours, 80,000 plus yen, a bit more than the minimum wage. There were a couple of problems during this internship. One is probably the culture. It didn't really fit me. When I go to the office, I would expect people to say hello or good morning, but in that company, there were no such habit, I guess. So people would just stare at their computer all day without talking to each other. Another problem was that my immediate supervisor invited me on a date, and I didn't really want to go on a date with him, but it was a bit awkward because he would decide my fate at the end. So I told him maybe not, and I didn't get the job in the end. I don't think it was because I rejected this person, but I did feel that it was not very professional, a bit of like pawahara, and so it was a bit of a mixed experience. I was very sad when I discovered I didn't get the job, but looking back, I'd probably not enjoy the environment anyway. So yeah, this was my experience working in Japan. Let me know in the comments if you have any more questions about it. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your views, your likes, and your subscriptions. Let me know what kind of other topics you want me to talk about. Don't forget to like this video as well, subscribe to my channel for more videos, and I see you another week. Thank you.